Welcome to today's reading from the Krishna book. We are on chapter 54. Krishna defeats all the princes and takes Rukmini home to Dvaraka. Jarasandh and all the other princes were very angry at Krishna for having kidnapped Rukmini. Struck by Rukmini's beauty, they had fallen from the backs of their horses and elephants, but now they began to stand up and properly arm themselves. Picking up their bows and arrows, they began to chase Krishna on their chariots, horses, and elephants. To check their progress, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty turned and faced them. Thus, terrible fighting began between the two belligerent groups. The princes opposing Krishna, who were led by Jarasandh and were all expert in fighting, shot their arrows at the Yadu soldiers just as clouds splashes the face of a mountain with torrents of rain. Gathered on the face of a mountain, a cloud does not move very much, and therefore the force of rain is much more severe on the mountain than anywhere else. The opposing princesses were determined to defeat Krishna and recapture Rukmini from his custody, and they fought with him as severely as possible. Rukmini, seated by the side of Krishna, saw arrows raining from the opposing party onto the faces of the Yadu soldiers. In a fearful attitude, she looked upon Krishna's face, expressing her gratefulness that he had taken such a great risk for her sake only. Her eyes moving, she appeared sorry. And Krishna, who could immediately understand her mind, encouraged her with these words. My dear Rukmini, don't worry. Rest assured that the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty will kill all the opposing soldiers without delay. As Krishna was speaking with Rukmini, the commanders of the Yadu dynasty's soldiers, headed by Lord Balaram, who is also known as Sankarshan, as well as by Gada, not tolerating the defiant attitude of the opposing soldiers, began to strike their horses, elephants, chariots, and arrows. As the fighting progressed, the princesses and the princes and the soldiers of the enemy began to fall from their horses, elephants, and chariots. Within a short time, millions of severed heads, decorated with helmets and earrings, had fallen on the battlefield. The soldiers' hands were severed along with their bows and arrows and clubs. Arms were piled upon arms, thighs upon thighs, and horses upon horses. Similarly, other animals such as camels, elephants, and asses, as well as infantry soldiers, all fell with severed heads. When the enemy headed by Jarasandh found that they were gradually being defeated by the soldiers of Krishna, they thought it unwise to risk losing their armies in the battle, for the Shishupal himself should have fought to rescue Rukmini from the hands of Krishna. But when the soldiers saw that Shishupal was not competent to fight with Krishna, they decided not to lose their armies unnecessarily. Therefore, they ceased fighting and dispersed. Some of the princes, as a matter of etiquette, appeared before Shishupal. They saw that Shishupal was discouraged like the one who has lost his wife. His face appeared dried up. He had lost all his energy, and all the luster of his body had disappeared. They addressed Shishupal thus: Our dear Shishupal, don't be discouraged in this way. You belong to the royal order and are the chief among the fighters. There is no question of distress or happiness for a person like you, because neither of these conditions is everlasting. Take courage. Don't be disappointed by this temporary reversal. After all, we are not the final actors. As puppets dance in the hand of magician, we are all dancing by the will of the Supreme, and according to his plan alone we suffer distress or enjoy happiness. We should therefore be equipoised in all circumstances. Although in the beginning the princes had been full of hope for success in their heroic action, after their defeat they could only try to encourage Shishupal with flattering words. Thus Shishupal, instead of marrying Rukmini, had to be satisfied with the flattering words of his friends and he returned home in disappointment. The kings who had come to assist him, also disappointed, then returned to their respective kingdoms. The whole catastrophe of the defeat was due to the envious nature of Rukmini's elder brother Rukmi. Having seen his sister forcibly taken away by Krishna after he had planned to marry her to Shishupal, Rukmi was frustrated. So after Shishupal, his friends and intended brother-in-law, returned home, Rukmi, very much agitated, was determined to teach Krishna a lesson personally. He called for his own soldiers, a military phalanx consisting of several thousand elephants, horses, chariots, and infantry, and equipped with the military strength. He began to follow Krishna to Dvaraka. To show his prestige, Rukmi promised all the returning kings, "You could not help Shishupal marry my sister, Rukmini, but I cannot allow Rukmini to be taken away by Krishna. I shall teach him a lesson. Now I am going to follow him." He presented himself as a big commander and vowed before all the princes, "Unless I kill Krishna in fight and bring back my sister home from his clutches, I shall never return to my capital city, Kundina. I make this vow before you all, and you will see that I shall fulfill it." After thus vibrating all these boasting words, Rukmi immediately got on his chariot and told his chariot driver to pursue Krishna. He said, "I want to fight with him immediately. This cowherd boy has become proud of his tricky way of fighting with Kshatriyas, but today I shall teach him a good lesson, because he had the impudence to kidnap my sister. I with my sharp arrows shall teach him very good lessons indeed." Thus this unintelligent man, Rukmi, ignorant of the extent of the strength and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, voiced his impudent threats. In great stupidity, he soon stood before Krishna, telling him repeatedly, "Stop for a minute and fight with me." After saying this, he drew his bow and directly shot 3 forceful arrows against Krishna's body. Then he condemned Krishna as the most abominable descendant of the Yadu dynasty and asked him to stand before him for a minute so that he could teach him a good lesson. "You are carrying away my sister just like a crow steals clarified butter meant to be used for sacrifice. You are proud of your military strength, but you cannot fight. According to regulative principles, you have stolen my sister. Now I shall relieve you of your false prestige. You can keep my sister in your possession only until I beat you to the ground for the good with my arrows." Lord Krishna, after hearing all these crazy words from Rukmi, immediately shot an arrow and severed the string of Rukmi's bow, making him unable to use another arrow. Rukmi immediately took another bow and shot another 5 arrows at Krishna. Being attacked for the second time, Krishna again severed Rukmi's bowstring. Rukmi took a third bow and Krishna again cut its string, this time to teach him a lesson. Krishna shot 6 arrows at him and then shot another 8 arrows, killing 4 horses with 4 arrows, killing the chariot driver and another arrow, and chopping off the upper portion of the Rukmi's chariot, including the flag with the remaining 3 arrows. Rukmi, having run out of arrows, took assistance from the swords, shields, tridents, lances, and similar weapons used for fighting hand to hand. But Krishna immediately broke them all in the same way. Being repeatedly baffled in his attempts, Rukmi took his sword and ran swiftly towards Krishna, just as a fly proceeds toward a fire. But as soon as Rukmi reached Krishna, Krishna cut his weapon to pieces. This time Krishna took out his sharp sword and was about to kill him immediately. But Rukmi's sister Rukmini, understanding that this time Krishna would not excuse her brother, fell down at Krishna's lotus feet and in a very grievous tone, trembling with great fear, began to plead with her husband. Rukmini first addressed Krishna as Yogeshwar. Yogeshwar means one who is possessed of inconceivable opulence and energy. Krishna possesses inconceivable opulence and energy, whereas Rukmini's brother had only limited military potency. Krishna is immeasurable, whereas her brother was measured in every step of his life. Therefore, Rukmini was not comparable even to an insignificant insect before the unlimited power of Krishna. She also addressed Krishna as the god of the gods. There are many powerful demigods such as Brahma, Shiva, Indra, Chandra, Varuna, but Krishna is the lord of all these gods. Whereas Rukmini's brother was not only an ordinary human being, but in fact the lowest of them, as he had no understanding of Krishna. In other words, a human being who has no conception of the actual position of Krishna is the lowest human being in the society. Then Rukmini addressed Krishna as Mahabhuj, which means one with unlimited strength. She also addressed Krishna as Jagatpati, the master of the whole cosmic manifestation. In comparison, her brother was only an ordinary prince. In this way, Rukmini compared the position of Rukmi with that of Krishna and very feelingly pleaded with her husband not to kill her brother just as the auspicious time of being united with Krishna, but to excuse him. In other words, she displayed her real position as a woman. She was happy to get Krishna as her husband at the moment when her marriage to another was to be performed. But she did not want it to be the loss of her elder brother, who after all loved his young sister and wanted to hand her over to one who, according to his own calculations, was a better man. While Rukmini was praying to Krishna for the life of her brother, her whole body trembled, and because of her anxiety, her face appeared to dry up and her throat became choked. And due to her trembling, the ornaments on her body loosened and fell scattered on the ground. In this manner, when Rukmini was very much perturbed, she fell down on the ground, and Lord Krishna immediately became compassionate and agreed not to kill the foolish Rukmini, but at the same time, he wanted to give him some light punishment. So he tied him up with piece of cloth and snipped at his moustache, beard, hair, keeping some spots here and there. While Krishna was dealing with Rukmini in this way, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty, commanded by Balram himself, broke the whole strength of Rukmini's army, just as the elephant in a tank discards the feeble stems of lotus flower. In other words, as the elephant breaks the whole construction of a flower while bathing in a reservoir of water, the military strength of the Yadus broke up Rukmini's forces. When the commanders of the Yadu dynasty came to see Krishna, they were all surprised to see the condition of Rukmini. Lord Balram became especially compassionate for his sister-in-law, who was newly married to his brother. To please Rukmini, Balram personally untied Rukmini, and to further please her, Balram, as the elder brother of Krishna, spoke some words of chastisement. "Krishna, your action is not at all satisfactory," he said. "This is an abomination very much contrary to our family tradition. To cut someone's hair and shave his moustache and beard is almost comparable to killing him. Whatever Rukmini might have been, he is now our brother-in-law, a relative of our family, and you should not have put him in such a condition." After this, to pacify Rukmini, Lord Balram said to her, "You should not be sorry that your brother has been made odd-looking. Everyone suffers or enjoys the results of his own actions." Lord Balram wanted to express upon Rukmini that she should not be sorry for the consequences of her brother suffered due to his actions. There was no need of being too affectionate toward such a brother. Lord Balram again turned toward Krishna and said, "My dear Krishna, a relative, even though he commits such a blunder and deserves to be killed, should be excused. For when such a relative is conscious of his own fault, then consciousness itself is like a death. Therefore, there is no need to kill him." Balram again turned towards Rukmini and informed her that the current duty of the Kshatriya in human society is so fixed that according to the principles of fighting, one's own brother may become an enemy. Then a Kshatriya does not hesitate to kill his own brother. In other words, Lord Balram wanted to instruct Rukmini that Rukmini and Krishna were right in not showing mercy to each other in the fighting, despite the family consideration that they happen to be brothers-in-law. Sri Balram informed Rukmini that Kshatriyas are typically emblems of the materialistic way of life. They become puffed up whenever there is a question of material acquisition. Therefore, when there is a fight between two belligerent Kshatriyas for kingdom, land, wealth, women, prestige, or power, they try to put one another into the most abominable condition. Balram instructed Rukmini that her affection toward her brother, who had created enmity with so many persons, was a perverse consideration befitting an ordinary materialist. Her brother's character was not at all admirable considering his treatment towards his friend. And yet Rukmini, as an ordinary woman, was affectionate toward him. He was not fit to be her brother, and still Rukmini was a lenient person towards him. Besides that, Balram continued, the consideration that a person is neutral or is one's friend or enemy is generally made by persons in the bodily concept of life. Such foolish persons are bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Soul is of the same pure quality in any embodiment of matter, but those who are not sufficiently intelligent see only the bodily differences between animals and men. Literates and illiterates, poor and rich, and which cover the pure spirit soul. Such differences observed merely on the basis of the body are exactly like the differences between the fires in terms of the various types of fuel they consume. Whatever the size and shape of the fuel, there is no such variety of size and shape in the fire which comes out. Similarly, in the sky, there are no differences in size or shape. In this way, Balram reconciled the situation by his moral and ethical instructions to Rukmini and Krishna. To Rukmini, he further stated, this body is part of the material manifestation, consisting of material elements, living conditions, and interactions of three modes of material nature. The living entity or soul spirit, being in contact with these, is transmigrating from one body to another due to illusory enjoyment, and that transmigration is known as material existence. The contact of the living entity with the material manifestation is neither integration nor disintegration. My dear chaste sister-in-law, the spirit soul is of course the cause of this material body, just as the sun is the cause of sunlight, eyesight, and the forms of material manifestation. The example of the sunshine and the material manifestation is very appropriate in understanding the chief contact with the living entity's contact with the material world. In the morning, the sun rises and the heat and light gradually expand throughout the whole day. The sun is the cause of all material shapes and forms, for it is due to the sun that integration and disintegration of material elements takes place. But as soon as the sun sets, the whole manifestation is no longer connected to the sun, which has passed from one place to another. When the sun passes from the eastern to the western hemisphere, the results of the interactions due to the sunshine in the eastern hemisphere remains, but the sunshine itself is visible in the western hemisphere. Similarly, this living entity accepts or produces different bodies and different relationships in a particular circumstance, but as soon as he gives up the present body and accepts another, he has nothing to do with the former body. He has got nothing to do with the body he accepts from the he is always free from the contact of his bodily contamination. Therefore, continued Balram, the appearance and disappearance of the body have nothing to do with the living entity, just as the waxing and waning of the moon have nothing to do with the moon. When the moon waxes, we falsely think that moon is developing, and when it wanes, we think moon is decreasing. Factually, the moon as it is always the same. It has nothing to do with such visible activities of waxing and waning. Lord Balram continued, one's consciousness in material existence can be compared to sleeping and dreaming. When a man sleeps, he dreams of many non-factual happenings, and as a result of dreaming, he becomes subject to different kinds of distress and happiness. Similarly, when a person is in the dream of material conditions, he suffers the effects of accepting a body and giving it up again in material existence, opposite to this material consciousness in Krishna consciousness. In other words, when a man is elevated to the platform of material consciousness, he becomes free from this false conception of life. In this way, Sri Balram instructed Rukmini in spiritual knowledge. He further addressed his sister-in-law as sweet smiling Rukmini. Do not be aggrieved by false notions caused by ignorance. Only because of false notions does one becomes happy. But one can immediately remove this unhappiness by discussing the philosophy of actual life. Be happy on the platform only. After hearing such enlightening instructions from Sri Balram, Rukmini immediately became pacified and happy and adjusted her mind, which was very much afflicted by the degraded position of her brother Rukmi. As far as Rukmi was concerned, his promise was not full, nor was his mission successful. He had come from home with his soldiers and military phalanx to defeat Krishna and release his sister, but on the contrary, he lost all his soldiers and military strength. He was personally degraded and very sorry, but by the grace of the Lord, he could continue his life to its fixed destination, because he was a Kshatriya and he could remember his promise that he would not return to his capital city, Kundina, without killing Krishna and releasing his sisters, which he had failed to do. Therefore, he decided in anger not to return to his capital city, and he constructed a small cottage in the village known as Bhojakta, where he resided for the rest of his life. After defeating all the opposing elements and forcibly carrying away Rukmini, Krishna brought her to his capital city Dvaraka and then married her according to the Vedic ritualistic principles. After this, Krishna became the king of Yadu at Dvaraka. On the occasion of his marriage with Rukmini, all the inhabitants were happy, and in every house there were ceremonies. The inhabitants of Dvaraka city were so pleased that they dressed themselves with the nicest possible ornaments and garments and went to present gifts, according to their means, to the newly married couple, Krishna and Rukmini. All the houses of Yadupuri, that is Dwarika, were decorated with flags, festoons and flowers. Each and every house had an extra gate especially prepared for this occasion. On both sides of the gate were big water jugs filled with water. The whole city was made fragrant by the burning of the incense, and at night there was illumination from thousands of lamps and decorated every building. The entire city appeared jubilant on the occasion of Krishna's marriage with Rukmini. Everywhere in the city there were profuse decorations of banana trees and betel nut trees. These two trees are considered very auspicious in happy ceremonies. At the same time, there was assembly of many elephants who carried the respective kings of different friendly kingdoms. It is the habit of the elephant that whenever he sees small plants and trees, out of his sportive and frivolous nature, he uproots the trees and throws them hither and thither. The elephants assembled on this occasion also scattered the banana and betel nut trees, but in spite of such intoxicated action, the whole city with the trees thrown here and there looked very nice. The friendly kings of the Kurus and Pandavas were represented by Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, and the 5 Pandavas brothers, King Draupad, King Santardana, and Rukmini's father Bhishmak. Because of Krishna's kidnapping Rukmini, there was initially some misunderstanding between the two families, but Bhishmak, the king of Vidarbha, being approached by Srila Balram and persuaded by mainly saintly persons, was induced to participate in the marriage ceremony of the Lord Krishna and Rukmini. Although the incident of the kidnapping was not very happy occurrence in the kingdom of Vidarbha, kidnapping was not as unusual affair among Kshatriyas. Kidnapping was in fact current in almost all their marriages. Anyway, King Bhishmaka from the very beginning inclined to hand over his daughter to Krishna. In one way or another, his purpose had been served, and so he was pleased to join the marriage ceremony, even though his eldest son was degraded in the fight. It is mentioned in Padma Puran that Maharaj Nand and the cowherd boys of Vrindavan joined the marriage ceremony. Kings from the kingdom of Kuru, Srinajya, Kaikeyi, Vidarbha and Kunti all came to Dvaraka on this occasion and met with one another joyfully. The story of Rukmini's being kidnapped by Krishna was poeticized and professional readers recited it everywhere. All the assembled kings and their daughters especially were struck with wonder and very pleased upon hearing the chivalrous activities of Krishna. In this way, all the visitors as well as the inhabitants of Dwarka were joyful to see Krishna and Rukmini together. In other words, the goddess of fortune was now united with the Supreme Lord, the maintainer of everyone, and thus all the people felt extremely jubilant. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 54th chapter of Krishna. Krishna defeats all the princes and take Rukmini home to Dwaraka. So tomorrow we will read the last chapter of this book, chapter 54, Pradyumna born to Krishna and Rukmini. So we have read another beautiful Leela here. The goddess of fortune was going to unite with the Supreme Lord, and this Leela was enacted in such a way that Rukmi, the brother of Rukmini, which is the goddess of fortune herself, who had arranged the marriage with Shishupal out of some animosity towards Krishna. Now Krishna had to teach all these princes a lesson, so he taught them a lesson when he arranged the marriage in a very current way of Kshatriya's marriage, which was called the Rakshas marriage, where they kidnap the bride of their choice if they wanted. So we are nearly going to finish our Krishna book tomorrow. This has been a bit longer reading because I wanted to keep to the target tomorrow. So I wish you all a very blissful week ahead, and thank you for joining Narayan Keshav Prabhu. I can't see the face, but I can see that one person has been watching with me. Hare Krishna.